see what we got going on. We stopped at sources of water for the body. Do you guys want to put a hold on the urine stuff and get to the balance, that metabolic stuff that we were going over, the pH and everything that we're going to be quizzed on? Mm-hmm. Okay. The rest of the urine stuff's pretty easy. Where do we get our water? He listed that. How does it leave the body? That's listed in our notes. Urine flow rate, a mill a minute. How's it calculated, a mill a minute? That's also in our notes. What are some causes and symptoms of dehydration and overhydration? I think that's in our notes. If not, we'll go back. Describe the control mechanisms of dehydration, hormone levels. I don't even remember him mentioning that. So we'll circle back to that because that stuff's kind of easier than what we need to wrap our head around right now, okay? Let's skip to 19. Is 19 just the 3 pages? Okay, define pH, acid, and base. What is the relationship between pH and hydrogen ions? Okay, let's get this stuff out of the way. So pH is just the concentration of hydrogen ions in a substance. That's all it is. The more hydrogens, the more acidic, aka lower pH, right? We have our pH scale. 7's neutral. This is acidic. And this is basic. Okay. And acid is just something that dissociates into and releases a hydrogen ion in water. So basically it releases or increases the amount of hydrogen. And a base, I think he just simplified it and said, is like a hydrogen ion acceptor. Slash lowers the number of hydrogen ions in a substance. pH is just number of hydrogens. Acid will release a hydrogen when it's dissolved in water, and a base will accept it, which lowers the number of hydrogens that are just free floating in the water. And remember with pH, log scale. So each number represents a power of 10. So if you went from a pH of 1, bless you, to a pH of 2, that's a difference of 10. But if you went from a difference of 1 to 3, that'd be 100, because the 2's worth 10 and the 3 is worth 10, so you multiply them. So basically, bless you.
Thank you.
However many numbers away you are, that's how many zeros there are. Okay. 2 minus 1 is 1, there's 1 0. 3 minus 1 is 2, there's 2 zeros. Just a quick way to do it. Good? the nitty-gritty stuff. So we'll start with blood. So normal, we'll do blood first. Normal pH of blood is somewhere between 7.35 to 7.45. You need to remember that, okay? Normal pH of blood. If our pH goes up, are we getting more basic or more acidic? If just regular pH. If our pH is going higher to like 14,
It's just
basic, right? Remember our pH scale? 7's neutral, and then 14 and 1, and this is a base, and this is an acid, right? So if we're going more to the right, if it's higher than that, it's going to be basic or alkaline. And if we go lower than this normal number, it's going to be acidic. Normal blood pH, what terms are used to describe a pH below? And then there's the little fancy words. So acidosis is like the term to describe blood that's acidic. And then alkalosis is when your blood is more basic. So how do we keep the blood pH within the certain range? We have those three major kind of pathways of doing that. So pH regulation. We have 3 different pathways. The first one is the fastest, but it's the weakest, right? And that is the buffer system. Buffers. It only takes seconds to work. But ends quickly. That's just when we constantly have acids and bases, like weak ones, just floating around in our body, and so the buffer system just uses those free-floating ones, to kind of neutralize something right away if we can. So if we suddenly have a lot of hydrogen ions floating around, the buffers, the opposite of that is a base.
Number 3?
Yeah. So number 2 is this one, and then now we're on to number 3, regulating the blood pH. So the first system is the buffer system. It's really fast, but it doesn't last very long. And basically we just have acids and bases kind of floating around in our system, and if there's an acid there and we need to lower it, they'll connect and it neutralizes it, and vice versa. So it's quick because they're already there, but they get used up fast, and then we need a way to really take care of all the extra stuff that's still going on. The second system is a little faster. It's not as fast, but it's a little stronger. That's our lungs. Remember, our lungs let out all the carbon dioxide, and that helps with acid, right? And so it's it only takes, this one takes a little longer, it takes minutes. But, minutes to hours, he said. Minutes to hours. But, lasts longer than the buffer system. Remember, that's our, that whole hyper and hypoventilating. So if you have lots of acid in your system, that is because you have lots of CO2. This is one of the reasons that it could be. Remember, the carbon dioxide will turn into the H2CO3, which is that carbonic acid, right? And then that breaks apart into just straight up hydrogen ions and HCO3. And this is another acid. And this is like what really messes with our pH, makes it super acidic. So when that happens, by using our lungs, we will hyperventilate to fix it. The fix is going to be hyperventilate. Increase your breathing, your breaths. By doing that, you're letting out as tons more carbon dioxide, right? You're breathing more, so you're going to decrease the carbon dioxide in your lungs or in your blood. That will decrease the amount of carbonic acid that it's making, and then that will therefore also decrease the amount of hydrogen ions. So now we're making less acid, so that will be we'll end up being less acidic than we were. Okay. So our problem was we were too acidic. We breathed more and got some carbon dioxide out. Now we're less acidic. And what he likes to write is, he says, we have a low pH here, and now we have a raised pH. But I think it's easier to just keep it. Is it acidic or not? The opposite of the hyperventilating was the hypo, the situation where we have not a lot of carbon dioxide. That means we only have a little bit of H2CO3. And that means we only have a little bit of a hydrogen ion. So now, when we don't have a lot of acid stuff, we're going to be too basic, okay? Too basic. That's our problem. So the fix for this is we need to create more acid. So we will hypoventilate. Hypo is less, so we'll breathe less. Like hold our breath. By holding our breath, we're not allowing any carbon dioxide to escape. We're keeping all of that in our blood. So by doing that, we will increase the amount of carbon dioxide that's in our blood. Then that will increase the amount of carbonic acid. And that will increase the amount of acid, the hydrogen ions, which is acid. And that will make us more acidic. Which fixes it, because our problem was that we were too basic. This should be a review. This is the stuff that we went over respiratory, and then we went over again in some other section too. So, yeah, so that's the lungs. We have too much carbon dioxide making us acidic. We breathe it out and it fixes it, and vice versa for the other way. Okay, and another one that really matters, the kidneys. Kidneys. This takes hours or days to kick in. most powerful. So yeah, the buffers are there, they'll kind of quickly take care of it, but it doesn't last. The lungs, yeah, you can do that and it'll take care of it, but it's not that great. Kidneys, it's going to have the biggest effect on everything. Strongest. This would be going. Okay. So we'll just keep it there and get a little more detailed later. Which one's the fastest? The buffer, the most powerful, kidneys. What is a buffer? A buffer is just something that kind of like neutralizes an acid or a base. Okay, so what is next? What are the different subcategories of L? Okay, so this is all the crazy stuff that he went over, so I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. Okay, we've got our blood already, right? Normal blood, that number, to the left it's acidic, to the right it's basic. The other thing that we need to know is for we'll also keep in mind carbon dioxide. That has normal levels that need to be maintained. So normal carbon dioxide is 35 to 45. Like he said, don't worry about like the units, just know the numbers. Normal amount of carbon dioxide in blood. So this is where we had to think, if we have more carbon dioxide, are we going to be more acidic or more basic? Remember, we just went over that. If you have lots of CO2, what is that going to make lots of? H2CO3, which means a lot of H plus ions, right? Yeah, so the higher number is going to be acidic. And if it's lower, it'll be the opposite, so it'll be basic. Remember, CO2 is acid. You have more acid. And then the last one that...
Number 5.
We're doing 5 now. I'm just breaking it up so that it'll make more sense.
Did you explain what a buffer exactly is?
Yeah, it's just a chemical substance that like keeps the pH in balance. Like it's either like acids or bases, and they need to kind of neutralize the other ones to keep everything normal. It stabilizes pH. Yeah, so we're on number 5 now. The different types of acidosis and alkalosis, and what causes them, and the compensations, and all that crazy stuff.
Is it the...
Yeah, but we're not going to do that, okay? We're going to do it differently. So we have our blood normal, where it's acidic and basic. Our carbon dioxide, where it's normal, where it's acidic and basic. And now our bicarb, HCO3, negative. That has normal ranges too. Normal for that, I think, was 22 to 26. That's normal. HCO3 negative in blood. And remember this, so carbon dioxide is an acid and this is a base, okay? So if we have more base than usual, we're going to be really basic, right? So higher number is going to be basic. If If we have less base, then we'll have more acid. That makes us more acidic. Okay, so pH, if it's a lower number, it's more acidic. We know that already, right? Carbon dioxide, that makes acid. So if it's a higher number, it's more acidic. The HCO3, that's a base. So if that's a higher number, it's going to be more basic, right? So we'll just kind of keep those in mind while we get to the next thing.
Wait, can I take a picture?
Okay, so let's do it. So I'll try this. Okay, the first one that we're going to deal with, we'll do respiratory stuff, okay? Respiratory. So that's at the lungs. So the first one we'll do is respiratory acidosis. Oh. Okay. All right, so respiratory acidosis. The problem, acidosis is so if it's in the lungs, what's happening if we're acidic? We have too much what? If we're talking about the lungs, why are we acidic? What's happening with the lungs? Yeah, too much carbon dioxide. So the problem, the problem is we're at the lungs, so we have too high CO2. Okay, that's our problem. That means we have too much H2CO3. That means we have too much hydrogen ions, right? And that is causing, is that, if we have lots of acid, is our pH going to be high or low? Remember a regular pH scale? Yeah, exactly. Low pH. So this is our problem, okay?
Can I go to the other side? Can't really see first.
Yeah. The fix for this the way that if our lungs are, the problem is that our lungs are being retarded, okay? They're not working for whatever reason, so they're not getting all this carbon dioxide out. So the fix is something else has to do, and that's going to be the metabolic way. So the fix will be the opposite, so metabolic. And then the opposite of acid is the alkalosis, right? So our kidneys will do stuff. What's going to happen is our kidneys I just don't want to put too much detail. They will do two things. They're going to increase, if we need to be more basic, they're going to increase the amount of base that we reabsorb. Remember, because that's our base, bicarb. And it will decrease the amount of blood that he meant to put increase our hydrogen secretion as well. Because remember, when we're secreting things, it's going from the blood into the tubes to be peed out, right? So if we're getting more of that out, we're going to get rid of a lot of acid. That'll decrease the amount of hydrogen in our blood, and together these things will increase our pH. So that fixed our problem. Our problem was that we had a low pH, now it's higher. And the things that can cause this situation for our lungs to be acting funky are things like emphysema and COPD, things that basically cause us to have to hypoventilate. Does that make sense? The problem, we have something like emphysema or something going on that's causing our lungs to not breathe as quickly as we need to. It's like slowing them down. That causes all that CO2 to just stay in our blood because we can't exit it out. That makes our blood more acidic, right? Low pH. So since our lungs are not working because of the situation, we need something else to fix it. That's our kidneys or whatever else. So the fix is that the kidneys will say, hey, we need to get rid of a lot of acid and add more base, so let's take up more of that base when it's going through that whole kidney nephron thing. And we're going to secrete, we're going to take out more of that acid, and that's going to just fix everything, balance it, and that'll fix our pH. Okay? Okay, so the opposite of this one would be respiratory alkalosis. So respiratory alkalosis, so at the lungs, we're too basic, right? So if that's happening, that means that we're probably breathing out too much acid, okay? So the problem is that we don't have enough CO2. We have a low CO2. This is our acid, right? It's not enough. That means we'll have less of the H2CO3. That means we'll have less of the hydrogen ions that we care about. That means less acid. So our pH will be too high. It's basic. I'm good so far? Okay. So now how do we fix that? Again, the problem is still at our lungs, so they're out, they're useless right now. Let's go do something else. Here come the kidneys, so it'll be metabolic. And then, what does it need to be? Because it needs to be the opposite of this.
Acidosis.
Yeah, acidosis. That's the fix. So once again, your kidneys are to the rescue. So remember, we're too basic here, right? Too much base. So we need to get rid of some of the base in our blood, right? So the kidneys will say, hey, instead of reabsorbing all that base, go ahead and don't do that so much. So it'll decrease our base reabsorption. So so we're not taking so much base in again. And it will also decrease our hydrogen secretion. Remember, if you secrete, that means we're taking it out of our blood. So if we're decreasing that, that means we're keeping the hydrogen, right? So more hydrogen in our blood, which means it'll be more acidic. So both of those things together will help to decrease our pH, make it more acidic. So we've accomplished the opposite of what was going on, so that fixes it. Things that can cause your lungs to not cause you to be breathing too much are anxiety. Like if you're anxious, you usually tend to hyperventilate. You have some sort of head injury, or you have some sort of like psychosis going on.
Creo que sí, no sé, ahorita me llamó ese güey que tenía que ir porque del hospital. Déjale pregunto y te mando mensaje.
That cause hyper.
Okay, bye.
So, good? A little better at least than, was that easier than the flow chart?
Oh, I understood the flow chart.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So that was the lung issues. Our lungs, if it's respiratory acidosis, there's too much acid going on at the lungs. That's probably because we're not breathing out enough of that carbon dioxide. So we have high carbon dioxide, that means lots of acid. To fix it, our kidneys will keep more base and get rid of more acid. That fixes it, okay? So respiratory alkalosis at the lungs, there's too much base. It's probably because we're breathing out all the acid. So our carbon dioxide's low, that causes low hydrogen, which means less acid. So how do we get more acid in here? We use our kidneys. We say, hey, let's actually get rid of some base and we'll keep a lot of that acid. So that fixes it.